my name is Tina, and welcome back to the G-Sport Hub. Even though we are just 2 weeks into the spring split, since we only have 6 teams now, that means basically we are nearing the end of the first round. While there are still 3 matches left before the round officially ends, we have now somewhat of an idea where teams stand and what to expect from them from the future. And after LJL, we also have a special guest at the end to talk about PCS, but first of all, LJL. The standings is basically how people expected, at least it's kinda correlating to my power rankings. To quickly go through it, our top teams and bottom teams are somewhat well defined. Most of the time, I'm gonna go into it more depth later, because there are some interesting things in the middle happening. But I would still say that my expectation of the 3 teams going into PCF playoffs are still DFM, the Hawks, and Sengaku Gaming. While Axis Crest and Vestion are gonna fight for that last LJL playoff spot for the 4 teams. I'm not gonna go through all the games, just some that I found interesting. And also just a reminder, we have a BO2 format right now, even though only the first match ended up in a tie. There is one tie, alright? The very first match, never again. Anyways, first of all, our first place team is DFM. And I know global fans are just gonna be like, it's just DFM. Just DFM again. Please just listen to me because they don't look clean at all. Even if our 2 title contenders, DFM and the Hawks, played on the very first day and DFM won 2-0. But the games were absolutely not one-sided. And let's talk about those games. In game 1, DFM were winning the early game, slowly gaining about 3,000 of a gold lead with the first blood, red plates, as well as getting the grubs. However, as time went on, SAG started winning fights, resulting in a Herald that, okay, maybe didn't have the best payout. But at that point, they just kept winning every single fight, not by a lot, but enough to extend their gold lead to over 4,000 and even get 2 Barons. The Hawks were knocking on DFM's inhibitors, and it looked like no matter what DFM do, they can't win anymore until...
上の3名からすると
かなりやり方いですね。
ノーウェイだなこれ。
さらにはミッドのミニオンも到達したということで時間切れになります。このポジションが取り続けることはできます。
どうエンゲージしても勝てるビジョンが見える。
戻ってくる前にポップブロッサム3マッタだリデンプションの対応。フェザーストームがマザー、いや遅れたマーブル。
あれ
いやちょっと
なんで俺がなんか言うたびに逆のことが起こるんだろう。
余りましたね。
And after that, it took another fight buffed up with the Baron to take game 1 in almost 40 minutes. It was a long and definitely not the cleanest game. And game 2 had somewhat of a similar story, but this time SAG were winning even in the early game. Not by much, DFM were able to fight back from time to time, but the gold lead stayed in favor of them until DFM finally won a team fight with good coordination that they threw all away at the Baron a few minutes later, giving them about 6,000 gold lead over to SAG. When SAG were the ones trying to take the Baron, only for them to be swiped up by DFM, and after that they weren't really able to recover again, making DFM win 2-0 in 2 very close games with a lot of throws. But it was just the first day of the season, and I'm gonna talk about SAG more later on. This match shouldn't really put any of those teams above the other. It only proves for me that yeah, these are probably our 2 best teams, and these are probably the 2 best teams that we're gonna see in the finals. And while later DFM very comfortably beat V3 and BCT, they had quite a problem against Axis Crest. Now, Axis Crest is an interesting team, and if you want an underdog story, I might just have the team for you. But now, just to show you that DFM is not this almighty beating everyone team, I want to highlight one specific game, especially since this is a game I will come back to later when I'm gonna talk about Axis Crest. It's game 2 of DFM versus Axis Crest. Of course, big surprise, Axis Crest being on the red side, their bot lane has been ganked a few times, but at 8 minutes, DFM were not able to execute it perfectly, and after a quick rotation from Axis Crest, they were able to get 2 kills onto a Kali. The game was a lot closer in both team fights and even in objective control than what you would expect from, at least at that time, a first place team versus the last place team. But Axis Crest definitely looked better this week, and once again I'm gonna come back to them later, because there is a reason why they look better. And there is a reason why I say they maybe are dark horse for the last PCS playoffs ticket. Were their fights clean? No, I don't think so. But they definitely made DFM work for their money, and even if eventually DFM overcame them at the Baron fight, after which they shortly ended the game, I think this still shows how after this SAG DFM gap, the previously thought Sengaku Gaming may not have their place secured just yet. I would say if we see any surprises this split, that's probably gonna be Axis Crest. DFM, on the other hand, still definitely a top team in this new meta. We could finally see Rayfark's famous Darius as well. He already has a good synergy with the other members who didn't change from last year, so it's no surprise that they hit the ground running as the split started. I 100% expect DFM to make it into the LJL finals once again, even if I personally think that the champion is gonna be someone else this time around, because yes, let's talk about the Hawks, the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. They have two new members this season, Abby on the top lane and Forest in the jungle, so it's understandable why, despite them being a super team, they couldn't just immediately win their first match. They have a new jungler, a Korean jungler who has some communication issues obviously, but as we go further into the split this will just go away, especially because SAG produces a lot of content and you can see Forest learning basic Japanese very rapidly. Also, their mid laner Dasher can just translate for them. Oh, and their support Vista had his first Japanese-only interview this week as well. How is their Japanese so good?
なんかちなみにみんなめっちゃ日本語うまい。でビスタはなんかアニメで覚えたんだよね。
アニメ大好きビスタ。
アニメがめっちゃ好きなので。
So language, while may be a problem right now, it really shouldn't as we go into playoffs and later on possibly the PCS playoffs as well. After losing to DFM, SAG looked pretty good in their next 3 games, even winning in the Fukuoka Derby against their kind of biggest opponent besides DFM, Sengaku Gaming. So I think while the exact position of DFM and the Hawks may be up for debate, the fact that they are our top 2 team is not. And this is just how we expected after a little gap we have on the 3rd place, Sengaku Gaming. And I have to be honest, they really haven't looked that great, and if they don't clean up their game, Axis Crest may just snatch their ticket to the PCS playoffs. Though, just this Saturday, both Sengaku Gaming and Axis Crest are gonna have quite a hard day playing against SAG and DFM. So they can for sure prove that they are worthy of the spot. But talking about Sengaku Gaming, they started off the split by only tying our last place team Burning Core. And while they beat their closest competitor Axis Crest, both games not even close to clean. Both could have been easily won by Axis as well. Sengaku Gaming were knocking on the base of Axis in just 22 minutes, which Axis could clear up, and Washita even had a monster play on Aatrox, showcasing that while his carrier mostly had downs so far, he is definitely someone to look out for in the future. And while Axis Crest actually had a pretty good game, it was unfortunately riddled with pauses. The game took like 2 hours, so I just can't imagine it being good mentally for the mostly young Axis Crest. And yet, despite everything, in 40 minutes they were already knocking in the base. Unfortunately though, it only took 1 good engage from Sengaku Gaming to seal their deal and close out this very long and very messy game. And Sengaku later also almost lost a game to V3. Even though V3 were unable to end the game there and Sengaku ended up winning, V3 is also a team behind them with Axis, so this middle of the pack is a lot closer I think than most people have expected. I'd still say that Sengaku probably gonna make it to the LJL playoffs, which is 4 teams, and I would still put them as favorites for the 3rd seed, but I wouldn't be surprised if something happens. And the team that is kind of surprising to me is Axis Crest in the next standings. I did put Axis Crest as 4th in my power rankings, and they are 4th, but they kinda are doing much better than I expected. They didn't have their coach Son and AD carry Seoul in Japan for the first week, and Vestion in an interview did mention that it affected their gameplay as well as the overall team atmosphere. And I have to give it to them. They looked a lot better this week now with everyone present. As previously mentioned, they almost beat DFM. If I give them the benefit of the doubt, yeah, first week not everyone were present. They also had that game with so many pauses. It really is tiring for these new players. I think they are definitely better, but hold your horses. So far, they only beat the last place team Burning Core. So while they passed my eye test, the real exam is coming up right now this Saturday against the Hawks. So good luck. Our last two teams remaining are the ones I don't expect to make playoffs, and just I predicted, they are V3 and Burning Core Toyama. V3 definitely looking better than last year. As I mentioned before, they could beat the first week's kind of struggling Axis Crest, but they could still beat them, as well as they had a somewhat close game with Sengaku Gaming, only failing at the very last step. So I think 5th place for them is somewhat reasonable, while Burning Core almost had some good moments. Obviously beating Sengaku in one game counts. They got somewhat close to beating Axis Crest too, but not really. So I still keep having the same opinion that I think they just lack any veteran voice. I do think that all the players on this team are LJL ready and they are in a good environment. I just can't see them in these 10 matches or something that they're gonna have to grow into LJL players. I think the lack of veteran voice is gonna be really detrimental for this team. So no real surprises. I think mostly high predicted in the pre-season power rankings, obviously with the exception of DFM being our number 1 team currently, but I keep saying Hawks' language barrier should get better as the season goes on, so I'm really looking forward to their rematch, which is gonna be this Sunday. Hopefully both teams can show their full potential and give us similarly 2 amazing games. Once again, I do think that this may be a preview of the LJL finals. But this is just the LJL. Our top 3 teams are gonna make it in the PCS playoffs, but they're gonna face other teams too. We also now know the format for how this exactly would look like, with the LJL first seed being directly seeded into the main stage of PCS alongside PCS 1, 2 and 3 more teams from the PCS play-ins. The PCS play-ins where the LJL second and third seed would start alongside PCS 3, 4, 5 and 6, as well as LCU 1 and 2. Okay, I swear this is all from me, but I do have a special guest for today. Official PCS English caster Vestion to talk about how the PCS is doing, since the PCS has also been going as well, and it's important to scout our future competition ahead of time. So, Vestion, take it away.
Hey guys, my name's Vestion, and I'm the play-by-play caster for the PCS. Now that we're roughly around halfway through the PCS's first round robin, I'm here to tell you a little bit about the power rankings and how the split's been going so far. Firstly, I think it's important to include that this split of the PCS has included best of 3s instead of what was always best of 1s in the past, and to decide side selection, they actually play a 1v1 before the games in order to sort of work out who's going to get Game 1 side selection and Game 3 side selection. In general, I mean, we've seen a lot of red side picks. Basically, whoever wins the 1v1s has been picking up red side for the majority of the time, which is a little bit curious because it does seem like blue side has a little bit of a safer time in bot lane. At least in the PCS, the bot lane of red side has been getting exploited really early on, especially by those utility junglers, and I think the only team so far to be able to weather that storm well has been PSG. The 1v1s are very important. We've seen some really exciting ones. I mean, the very first one of the season was Driver up against Gory, and Gory recalls, dies to the ring, and that is how Driver ends up winning it after what looked like he was just definitely going to lose. And, I mean, certain teams have also come up with strategies in order to win these 1v1s. I know DCG in general, they like to play Volley Bear, and to get Volibear 2 games in a row. They actually played with Taco first. He picked the Volibear. Second game, they brought in Orca, who was their support, I guess hoping that Volibear wouldn't get banned, and then he just played Volibear as well. And so there is a little meta that's happening within the 1v1s, and I sometimes wonder if these teams are actually scrimming 1v1s as well to sort of work out who it is that's going to be playing them. In terms of power rankings in the PCS, I mean, in general, you look at those big names. If you've seen sort of the names on paper, PSG, massive lineup, exactly the same as last year, but instead of Wako, they have Betty, which is, for sort of my money, is actually just a straight upgrade, which means the team is looking better. They did falter last week against Frank, who are looking extremely good with the new addition of Jimian as well as Jiang and Gemini. Obviously, Jimian and Gemini playing on CFO last year already have some synergy that exists. They also kept Pretender, and oftentimes sub out Jimian and Pretender depending on game, depending on side selection and whatnot. And honestly, I think that substitution actually allowed them to beat PSG in our most recent game of the week. So, I mean, in terms of the power rankings, I would still probably have PSG at first, but then honestly, between second, it's really hard to tell. If BYG is second, they're looking really strong. Frank obviously looking really strong, still undefeated. I have CFO up there as well, of course, but they did look a little rocky. They have really switched on recently, though, and against teams that are weaker than them, they've absolutely decimated. So I wonder how they're going to do up against the sort of top-tier teams. Still, they haven't faced Frank, they haven't faced PSG, so a little bit of a question mark around that, of course, but certainly looking strong. And these are teams, especially the LJL and the LCO teams, are going to really struggle against, I think. It's very hard when you come over here and face these teams, and I think this split, they've actually just leveled up yet again, which is kind of surprising because last year at least, Spring Split, the PCS looked a little weaker. They then picked up a bunch of these returning LPL players, the likes of Betty, Kenny Chan, Chelsea. But this split, they've just upgraded in general anyway. Obviously, Casa, Sorda coming back, Gory coming back from NA. So really, really strong teams. I think in terms of individual players, the biggest standout I think has been Junjie. I mean, other people will likely have a different opinion, but Junjie, he's been playing Nocturne a lot, and he's been just walking up top, getting kills level 4, level 3 every single game, which obviously as Nocturne is not really expected. And I also think Gemini has been playing a lot better this split. He had one shaky game as Viego in his very last game, but ultimately he has been looking good. The Rail has looked really good for him. The Maokai looks really good. So these two junglers, I think, have looked the absolute best. Massive surprise around J-Team, actually, because they have been faltering quite hard. Even in their most recent series up against Hellpigs, it was really Lakai who was the only person getting them across the line, and he obviously came in after some substitutions, Hanabi as well as Enso being removed from the team. But it's a bit of a concern when they're going up against what is everyone's expected worst team in the league, and you actually struggled to kind of end out these games. I think both games went for 33 minutes and 37 minutes or something like that. So as the second, third seed of the LJL, as well as the first and second seed from LCO, should probably be concerned about this team because they are likely to be part of that top 6, which will qualify for playoffs. So yeah, definitely something to watch out for, but at least so far they don't look too scary. Massive surprise as well about DCG. Criscata obviously role swapping into the mid lane from AD carry last year, and he's played 6 unique champs in 6 games. He's looked really, really impressive for the most part. I think the only game where he did look pretty bad was the LeBlanc, and in general PCS seems to just not know how to play around the split pushing LeBlanc almost at all, and so not too surprised that was his bad game. Every other game he's looked really, really good. Sort of been the most stable member of the team. Taco, he's carried some games, but he's also kind of Giga Grief some games. Tide still has been looking really good. His Lucian has been so clean. And I think in general, Lucian has been the biggest power pick so far in the PCS, maybe alongside Rumble. But in general, I think in terms of the meta, they're doing much the same as global regions. Notably, Senna has been awfully absent from the drafts, and Ash has a near on 100% presence. So yeah, I hope this has given you some insight now that we're halfway through the PCS's first round robin. Of course, there's a long time to go. It's going to be very exciting to see how these power rankings change. I'm sure I'll be able to talk about that in the future with you guys, but yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. For everything LJL, make sure to follow us on all possible social media platforms. It's at GSportHub everywhere, and I can't wait to see what the next round holds for the LJL. Until then, make sure to watch all the interviews, everything translated to English on this channel. I was Tina with the GSportHub, and see you in the next video. Bye bye!